Check 1, 2, audio stream test.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Local Plan Committee. I'm Chairman, Councillor Gerard Oxford. This meeting is being broadcast via Zoom over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel, and you will be able to available to watch it afterwards. To begin, there are a few matters of housekeeping. For those attending here in the Moot Hall, I can assure you that a risk assessment has been carried out and undertaken for this meeting. Can I remind everyone that seating is socially distanced with 2 meters between each seat. Masks can be removed when seated. Would participants, both those joining us online and in the Moot Hall, please mute their microphones unless they are invited to speak. I will announce the name and invite to speak those participants wishing to make representations to the committee members in the order of business to be conducted. I will ask for each item of business to be presented and ask each member of the committee in turn if they wish to ask a question or make a comment. At the end of each item of business, the Democratic Services Officer will confirm the outcome of the vote. We may have a short break at 8 p.m, subject to the progress of business. So if I can introduce the committee on my right.
Councillor Derek Loveland from Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Lewis Barber, Lexington Braeswick Ward.
Councillor Jeremy Hagan, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Julie Young, Greenstead Ward.
Councillor Adam Fox, Old Heath, the Hythe and Rowhedge.
Councillor Andrea Luxembourg, Councillor for Wivenhoe.
Councillor Nick Cope, Knight, Christchurch and Newtown.
Richard Clifford, Lead Democratic Services Officer.
Karen Syrett, Lead Officer for Planning, Housing and Economic Growth.
Sandra Scott, Place Strategy Manager.
Thank you, everybody. That's that. Number 2, urgent items. We have none. Yes?
That's right, Chairman.
Thank you. Substitutions. Any substitutions this evening?
Councillor Nick Cope for Phil Coleman.
Thank you. Did you get that one? Yes.
I did, Chair, yes.
Okay.
Yes, Councillor Moore has sent apologies, Chairman, but I don't think she is substituted.
Okay, thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Anybody? No declarations of interest. There are no minutes to approve from the last meeting. We're on to general have your say, and I have 2 speakers under general items of have your say. The first one is Councillor Pam Cox. If you'd like to come forward, Pam. You know the processes, so I will let you start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be brief. The former Abro site next to Abbey Fields is expected to be put on the market by the Ministry of Defence very soon. As you probably know, it includes a significant section of the buried track of the unique Roman circus. The site is in my ward and also that of Councillor Cope. And I take a particular interest in it in that capacity, but also in my personal capacity as a resident of the ward and my professional capacity as a historian. Like many others, I think the council should buy the Abro site, and turn it into a flagship development that would combine heritage and housing. I feel this is a now or never moment for the Roman circus. So my question is in three parts. How can we advance council discussions to buy the site? Because I know those discussions are happening. How can we advance those discussions to buy the site and turn it into the flagship development that I mentioned? Secondly, how can the current development brief, which I think is excellent, how can it include an SPD, a supplementary planning document, to ensure that any housing on the site is affordable, sustainable, and in keeping with the heritage sensitivities of the site? And thirdly, can the committee clarify what the Section 106 arrangements for the site are likely to be, and whether they absolutely include landscaping to reveal at least the line of the track, the circus track, additional or extended visitor car parking, and the creation of a new visitor centre or the extension of the existing visitors centre. And I should say I've had discussions with CAT, the Cultural Archaeological Trust, and Philip Crummy on this matter, and they are, well, he in particular, fully behind those suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Karen Sarah would like to respond to yours.
Thank you. There was discussion at the last meeting about this document and pros and cons, I guess, for a supplementary planning document. The con being that it takes a bit longer. So I think the decision from memory was that we adopt the development brief as council policy, as supplementary planning guidance in the interim. And then at the same time, we start to progress the document through the through the SPD route, which involves formal public consultation, involves sustainability appraisal and that sort of additional work, but it does carry more weight in any decision-making process. So I think officers agree that it's worthwhile doing that. Section 106 obligations will be determined when any application is made. So the precise makeup of those isn't known at this stage. But what I would say is affordable housing and strategic policies like that will come into play. So there will be an expectation, regardless of the status of the development brief, that any development there will meet the council's affordable housing policies. We also think that there would be a condition or a clause in the agreement requiring the Roman circus to be laid out and interpreted in accordance with the management plan, and for this work to be undertaken by the developer. This is the approach that's been used on other similar sites. The Abro brief does provide the potential for the future expansion of the Roman circus house. However, there's no proposals as to how the centre may be extended, and therefore it's not possible for the brief to be precise in this matter. But, you know, that's something which might come forward at a later date. So I can't answer the question on discussions about buying the site, but I can certainly pass those on to colleagues and ask for a written response too, sorry.
Thanks very much.
Might I just add that it might be a question you will want to put to Cabinet early next month about the purchasing, because there's a capital issue. I've got two other speakers on this. Right, okay. Councillor Young first and then Councillor Fox.
I think it may be the same point that we want to raise. When we discussed this, Chair, there was a recommendation that went from the local plan committee to go to Cabinet to consider the purchase of the site. And given the fact we've got the portfolio holder in the room, might it be possible that they come forward and answer that point, whether there's the intention of the Cabinet to pursue a purchase of the site as recommended by the committee?
I'm not so sure he would want to commit his colleagues to that tonight. I would probably think that's a Cabinet meeting next month, but I'll ask him in a moment if he'd like to make comment. Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it really was very similar to Councillor Young, and I'm very supportive of Councillor Cox's approach to the committee this evening. And I wondered, in your capacity as Chair, what you have done in order to pursue the committee's approach to request for Cabinet to investigate the purchase of the site.
I have personally had conversations with the leader and I plan to attend Cabinet early next month. Councillor Alice, did you want to respond tonight or on this subject?
Chair, can we use the microphone, please,
Yeah,
so we
please
can all
come
hear?
forward.
Thank you very much.
I know. Well, I think I won the race to get my mask on, so I think that's why. Yeah, the short answer is we have asked our officers to investigate the feasibility of it. Obviously, they'll come back to us before next Cabinet, and we will listen carefully to their advice, but it's something being asked about.
Thank you. Right, so the next speaker we have is via Zoom, and it's Councillor Dave Harris. Evening, Dave.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, everybody in the room. It's great to see you from a distance away, but I got the warm welcome you've given me. Thank you. I wanted to talk, Chair, for a moment, if I may, on past developments such as the Solus and Quarters, and the connectivity that we all now take for granted that they've struggled to get there. Broadband and the connectivity that they lacked when the development was first built. Now, I'm acutely aware, Chair, that these days things have changed dramatically. You book your theatre tickets by online, your doctor's appointments, your dentist appointments, your COVID vaccine, community facilities. I'm even talking to you, aren't I, by Zoom, and you even service your car in this way these days. Those people on those estates had to wait 10 years for that. That's because it was never thought about in those years. Now we know, and luckily we have bits of our local plan, Chair, which I'm very pleased to say and to support tonight. The SP6 Section D talks about making sure that developers ensure there's connection for ultra-fast broadband. Now, I just want to sort of say to you that the government consultation that was held in 2018 in relation to delivering gigabit capable connections in new build developments were adopted by the government, and in 2020 the government announced that that was in response to the consultation, of course, will be making sure that they change the law to make sure all new homes in the future will have gigabit broadband as standard. That will save the people like my daughter and my neighbours and others living on these estates where they've had to wait so long to actually do even school homework from home to be a reality. What I'm asking, Chair, just to bring it to a finale, I would like to suggest to the committee that we monitor those the legislations that's coming down the pipeline to ensure that building regulations, legislations, and other national policy that guidance that's obviously going to come out on this to ensure that our Colchester new developments is provided with the best possible high quality communications and infrastructures required. Now, for me, that's just a given and it should happen. And I'd hope the committee would find favour in what I'm saying and support that stance. I'm sure the officers would support that. In fact, I'd like to thank here publicly the officers that have been talking to me for the advice. And I've been looking across the country, Chair, on other authorities who are already doing exactly what we should be doing, and that's ensuring that we do build as standard this gigabit. I will make a final remark, Chair, on a different subject, just to, I'm not going to repeat what I've said at previous local plan meetings about Middlewick, but I will ask the Chair and the committee if the MP, Will Quince, has been in communication with the committee at all about the take it off the table, remove the sale of Middlewick stance, and whether there's any further dialogue happening, because I am ever hopeful that the MOD may take it off the table at some stage and stop what we don't want in our area. Thank you for listening to me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I gave you a few seconds over the top there. In relation to the comment, the final comment from David, Karen, did you want to come back on that at all? In relation to, I mean, it related to the MP, so it's very difficult to actually comment on another individual from another authority, isn't it?
Yes, I was simply going to say that I know Rachel in particular has been helping Councillor Harris with some information, and I think we would support what he's saying about ensuring new development has access, has good connectivity and access to broadband, but I wouldn't want to comment on the MP.
Thank you. Now we move on to item 7, and we have a fair list, so bear with me for a moment. We have a number of individuals who have sent in their comments or statements to be read out, so I will call each one in turn, and you're going to enjoy this, aren't you, Richard? Our democratic services will read out each one, and then once we've done these, I'll then call for the officer to present the report. So first off is Nick Chilvers.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Nick Chilvers' submission. I've asked this before at your December 2020 meeting, but since the response was somewhat vague, I'll put it again. Where are the job creation plans for the 1,000-ish working age residents on the Middlewick? The plan seems to be silent on the matter. What employment land has been provided nearby so they don't have to jump in their cars to access work along the heavily used road network from the southeast? Answer, there isn't any. Whitehall and Gospecks industrial areas are full and can't be expanded. The town centre is shrinking in terms of well-paid employment. Please don't offer up home working as a solution. It won't be credible for most of these residents, nor will cycling, walking and public transport for the Wick with its lousy connectivity. It's a pipe dream. So where will they find work that pays enough to fund a reasonable lifestyle without adding to pollution and congestion? If that development is to go ahead, surely it has to be part of a rounded plan. Can I add that it would be nice to have an answer from the chair this time rather than officers? This is, after all, your committee's plan and you should have the answers.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a number of answers here for Mr. Chilvers. Firstly, the policy does not require expressly allocation of businesses on Middlewick. It's a mixed use provision, and it does not expressly require it by policy. The plan must be viewed as a whole. Whilst it is right that the Middlewick allocation policy does not refer to jobs employment provision directly linked to the site, the plan covers economic opportunities through a range of policies strategically and locally. I can go on. I don't want to bore everybody, but I could go on. Middlewick is situated on the edge of the urban area of Colchester, which provides for a wealth of job opportunities and a range of employment through existing businesses and proposed growth areas, including those within the town centre and around Colchester in the east, north and west. Access to these opportunities and others beyond Colchester has the opportunity to be enhanced through infrastructure improvements which the plan as a whole proposes and for the development at Middlewick itself. The modifications to the local plan has raised the bar on the requirements related to transport and sustainable travel, A good development informed by comprehensive assessments and master planning should improve many of the existing challenges, which in turn enhance the access to the range of employment opportunities within Colchester and further afield if appropriate. And just scrolling down. Right. This, and he asks about home working, and it's whilst home working is not a solution in itself, it is reality at home that home working is available to many types of jobs and has significantly increased and is here to stay. This is not used as a reason not to provide places for people to work, but it has to be acknowledged that home working will continue to change the requirements of many employers, including reducing the time and frequency of commutes to work for many. This will apply to residents living in all types of houses for many types of work throughout Colchester Borough, including Middleweight. And one final bit that I put down here said about surely that it has to be part of a rounded plan. And I agree, it has to be part of the rounded plan, and the local plan with all its modifications, including the Middleweight policy, comprises an overall plan for Colchester, which seeks to address all social, environmental and economic opportunities to manage the growth and place for existing and new residents. So thank you very much for that. Could we move on now to Richard Martin, please? Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Richard Martin's comment. I would like to thank the committee for hearing my statements. Unfortunately, I cannot be in attendance to address you personally. One of our main concerns with the inspector's modifications to the local plan and its relation to Middleweight Ranges, SC2 in the local plan, are the legal obligations the inspector has recommended. Would they be overturned at some point in the future when developers put forward their plans? We have all heard of horror stories of big developers going to the High Court and having planning objections overturned as they make the proposed development unviable. Even Colchester was not exempt from this, with social housing cut from the Lexton Hospital development, as Essex County Council said the plans would not be viable. What happened to the developer is granted an excuse by a High Court, and the legal obligations they signed up to when purchasing Middleweight are thrown out or reduced in strength. Middleweight Ranges is unique in the town and one of the most important wildlife sites in the county. The gamble that the acid grassland can be replaced by a few hundred metres away on untested arable land is risky in extreme. I wonder if the inspector would gamble his house on it working. Would the committee risk such a gamble? I must admit, watching the last planning committee online, and it was good to see them come to a conclusion that if the development was wrong, then that development should be rejected regardless of the possible cost of an appeal. Every political party in Colchester has said that Middleweight shouldn't be developed on, with online statements and political party leaflets going through residents' doors on this subject. Then why do we find ourselves at this stage? If the consensus is that development of Middleweight is wrong, then it should be taken out of the local plan by default. South Colchester will become the toxic capital of Colchester. At least 1,000 cars will be added to the already busy local roads. There are no easy routes to main infrastructure hubs without adding additional stress on already overladen junctions. We have already seen this month a planning application deferred due to Essex Highways reports not being good enough. Could this be a similar case and the Highways report being understated to get approval? I appreciate how difficult it would be to take Middleweight out of the local plan without the whole plan collapsing, and the committee should be judging those modifications on the line of what's right and not what's easy. That concludes that one.
Karen, do you want to comment to any of those or not?
I think perhaps we'll take, I think all the speakers are about Middleweight, so suggest we take them all together in this instance and then answer together.
Fair enough. In that case, I'll ask you when they're all been done. Okay, so the next one is Richard Kilshaw.
Thank you, Chairman. The inspector's extensive modifications to policy SC2 Middleweight Ranges makes clear that the allocation of this site for development was ill thought out, unsound, and reflects the community's principal objections on transport infrastructure, sustainability, landscape and ecological significance, and the increasing reliance on the questionable reliability of biodiversity net gain. The inclusion of a conservation partner, legal commitment to 30-year ecological monitoring amongst other constraints, will make the site less attractive to developers and possibly economically unviable. Clarification of up to 1,000 dwellings, reduced further if traffic impacts cannot be addressed, should stop amendments to increase this number through a developer-led viability assessment, although this may still be used to reduce the number of affordable homes. Planning applications will struggle to achieve a minimum of 10% BNG using the latest Natural England metric as recommended, instead of the bespoke system used to shoehorn Middlewick into the local plan. Full evaluation of protected species within the development footprint, which was ignored in the initial evaluation, and strict adherence to the mitigation hierarchy should make clear that the arable land earmarked as compensatory habitat would be a better place for development. Concerns still need to be addressed regarding the lack of a realistic timeframe to recreate the acid grassland to be lost, and how the dependent wildlife is expected to survive until this matures. Recreating complex ecosystems is highly unpredictable beyond the most basic habitat type, altering the soil chemical composition in the hope that appropriate flora and fauna will colonize as these compensatory habitats mature, particularly given current declines and rarity of many of the original species is optimistic and unlikely to achieve any more than a pale shadow of the original. Several councillors have expressed concerns regarding biodiversity net gain. It is important to note it was designed to support ecological expertise and assessment, not to replace it or to be viewed in isolation. The climate emergency declared by Colchester Borough Council in 2019 and the associated biodiversity chaos is increasingly urgent, and our first priority must be to halt the decline. Planting trees isn't going to make any difference, as many saplings are to be bulldozed from the development footprint, and the loss of extensive semi-natural grassland, which is also a vital carbon store. Previous debate and a narrowly lost vote to look at the feasibility of a Middlewick Country Park was appreciated by those fighting the development and was seen as a sign that many councillors want to make changes to business as usual in light of their new green obligations. I don't think anyone is looking forward to a 6-week consultation period, but there are alternatives to the SC2 plan looking forward to start again, which would not be as onerous as it sounds if Middlewick is removed.
You're all right, you're catching your breath. You're nearly halfway there. The next one is Belinda Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. Belinda Baker poses her submission is a number of questions. So question 1, MM14. Applicants will be expected to provide information for the purposes of the habitat regulations assessment. SMR considers that the Stantec reports are incomplete and misleading. Essex Wildlife have publicly stated the government's own national planning policy guidelines clearly state that housing site allocations should always be determined by local authorities through a coordinated approach to spatial planning, which is policy-led and avoids harm to local sites of importance for wildlife. In the case of Middleweight ranges, these national guidelines have not been followed. The Trust were approached by the Defence Infrastructure Organisation in 2018 to comment on the technical aspects of the ecological survey being undertaken by Stantec consultants. We made our continued opposition to the proposals clear at the time and informed them that we would formally object. The nature of EECO's involvement to provide technical advice to Colchester Borough Council in relation to Middleweight ranges. This technical input should not be misinterpreted or misrepresented as support for the development. FOI requests have indicated that EECOS was the CBC Ecology advisor, and the EW statement implies that the view of the advisor have been misinterpreted. Further surveys undertaken this year have indicated that the Wick is such an important wildlife site. SMR Group wants complete assurance from the Council that any habitat regulation assessments, ecological reports, etc., is followed up and investigated by an independent ecologist, so that not only the reports of those submitted by the landowner or the developer are accepted. Furthermore, we request that the Save Middlewick's own ecology report be consulted along with views from Essex Wildlife, Essex Field Club, Culture and Natural History and other groups where relevant. Question 2. Technical reports indicate Birchbrook will be impacted. MM18 says proposals are encouraged to be in compliance with the Anglian River Basin Management Plan or its successor, which addresses pressures on the water environment and whose environmental objectives are legally binding on all public bodies, whose decisions affect the quality of the water environment. Birchbrook is a significant factor both to surface water and flooding issues. SMR requests to have total transparency of exactly what will be done with regards to anything water related so that this can be properly assessed. Question 3, MM45. Development at Middlewick Ranges will be pleased to start towards the middle of the planned period. This is necessary to enable further detailed work to be carried out to inform the comprehensive master plan process as described above, and to allow for appropriate engagement with all relevant parties, including the local residents. How will CBC ensure resident engagement and which areas will be covered? Old Heath, Hythe, Row H and Beer Church, particularly Monkwick, Birch Glen, Willows, Abbots Road, Speedwell areas, Mersey Road and Shrub End. And question 4, if the development goes ahead, where does CBC propose to provide a version of Westlands Country Park or Highwoods Country Park for South East Colchester residents? Shall I carry on?
Yeah, the next one is Andrew Wilkinson.
Andrew Wilkinson's comments are as follows. I'd like to thank the committee for allowing me to raise a number of questions as a result of the inspector's modifications to the local plan. Reading through the modifications in the inspector's report MM5, it states, note SB3 in section 1 refers to the housing supply period of 2013 to 2033, therefore refers to a higher supply total of 18,400. There have been 7,804 new dwellings completed since 2013-14, which when added to the supply of 11,895 results in a total of 19,699 units. 4,075 dwellings have been completed since the local plan was submitted in 2017. Can you clarify what this means? Does this mean we have or propose to build 1,299 homes above what we are required to by government housing targets? If so, why are we holding more homes in the borough than we are required to by government? As Colchester has already been overdeveloped in the past 20 years against the wishes of local residents, why are we not allocating the minimum period by law, the minimum required by law? Should we not lower the housing allocation in the local plan to the minimum and remove allocation of housing in the local plan by 1,299 homes? A simple way to reduce this is by removing highly contentious developments such as the Middlewick ranges for the bulk of this, leaving just 299 homes to be removed from the housing allocation. This would surely be the easiest way to make the plan sound. So can we remove housing allocations from the local plan at this stage? And if not, why not? And if we remove housing allocations from this local plan now, what, if any, are the implications? And there are two more. One is from Grace Dark, who comments, I would like to thank the committee for allowing me to raise a number of issues as a result of the inspector's modifications for the local plan. Current housing targets are based on 2014 stats, and since then population growth has slowed dramatically. The national housing target is 300,000 homes per annum, but only 160,000 households are forming. The world has changed dramatically since the local plan was developed, particularly as a result of Brexit and COVID over the last 18 months. It is estimated that the UK population has declined by between 400,000 and 1.25 million since July 2020, according to recent reports. Even the ONS estimates that the UK population has declined by 750,000 during this period. Fundamental changes are taking place regarding the need for retail and office space going forward. Even Colchester Borough Council is reducing its office space at Rowan House significantly, and the large former BT offices at St Peter's has been converted to housing as the need for office space declines. This excess commercial space may well become available for housing. Are the allocations for both retail and office space detailed in the local plan still valid in the light of changing circumstances with increasing amounts of vacant retail and office space in the town? Added to this, the current local plan has allocated 1,299 more houses than is required by government housing targets. Based on these figures, should the housing allocation under the local plan be reduced by at least 1,299 houses to make the plan sound? And the final submission is from Lisa Cross, who is as follows. I'd like to thank the committee for allowing me to raise a number of issues as a result of the inspector's modifications to the local plan. MM37 concerns that Middlewick Ranges is an important ecological site and states Middlewick Ranges is a designated local wildlife site, reference CO122. The site was reviewed as part of a wider local sites review in 2015, and as a result of the review, the area designated has been extended. The ecological evidence report confirms that the habitats within the site are of high biodiversity value, including 53 acres of acid grassland. The site also supports a range of protected species such as invertebrates, breeding birds and bats. Council is aware that the site supports at least one protected species. Therefore, given the site's ecological sensitivity, full ecological assessments will need to be undertaken as part of any planning application, including for all protected species and species of principal importance during the appropriate survey. seas. MM47 also states the legal mechanism will identify the funding mechanism and governance structure, including the option of designation as local nature reserve that ensures both the nature conservation value and local community interest in the retained acid grassland, other protected habitats, the biodiversity mitigation and compensation land and areas of net gain. Middleweight is the only significant large wildlife area in this part of Colchester, offering a buffer and green lungs from the heavily congested estates of the Willows, Abbots Road estates, Barn Hall, Old Heath, Monkwick and Birch Glen. In addition, it acts as a major wildlife corridor. Other areas of Colchester have easy access to large wildlife parks, such as Westlands Country Park and Highwoods Country Park, for example. How will you ensure the residents of this area continue to have easy local access to a large wildlife area in common with other areas of Colchester? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard, very much. I'm going to have Karen seek to answer as much as she can from that, and then I'm going to call Bethany Jones to actually present the report. But Karen and Sandra, between you, if you'd like to try and respond.
Chair, we have two other have your say speakers in the room as well.
I didn't know whether they would respond to the ones you've read out and then take the two separate. Is that okay? Yep. Is that how you'd prefer it? That's fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Happy to do that. I'll kick off, and Karen can come in with further points afterwards. I'll try and cover the answers sort of topic based, because there was some sort of commonality in some of those issues raised. So starting with points in relation to the ecology and biodiversity, I just make a few general comments responding to the points, many of the points that were made, and that the evidence that was before the examination was prepared by technical ecological experts and on behalf of the DIO, and supported by ECOS, who was representing the council as the council's ecologist. And that includes the bespoke metric that was used, which the series of suggested solutions to date that are in that evidence regarding things like the acid grassland and other ecological assets are based on that evidence and advice with the support of ECOS. The whole allocation proposal and the evidence that supports it, this is a proposed local plan allocation, so it is at an early stage, and it necessary to for the purposes of the local plan examination. Further survey work and ecological assessments will be required at the master plan stage and at planning application stage. So this is an ongoing sort of consideration. I think there was a point about habitats regulations, and it's all reports will be required to comply with habitats regulations and all other ecological requirements, and they will be and need to be agreed by an independent ecologist on behalf of the council at the time that that's available. Just on a point regarding a legal obligation to do with in relation to biodiversity net gain, which is referenced was by one of the speakers. That is something that is to be mandated in the Environment Bill, so that will be a legal requirement anyway. So I don't think that's viewed as something that would necessarily be not enforceable, or something that could perhaps be negotiated away from at a later point. Looking at matters related to open space, green infrastructure, I think the modifications that are proposed in the policy recognise the importance of open space and green infrastructure and the environmental assets on and around the site, and allow for us opportunities for master planning to ensure that these areas are well planned, creating opportunities to enhance accessible space managed for wildlife and public enjoyment. And although the policy does obviously support the delivery of housing, that does have the benefit of being able to actually deliver managed and enhanced space for a range of uses, both for wildlife and public access, to a greater level than it may currently do and may otherwise be possible. I think there was a question about just again, really through master planning, to actually define a bit more clearly the type, the nature, the location of that accessible space, what's for wildlife, what's for public access, what it looks like, how it's used and so on, and how it's managed, are all considerations that are provided with safeguards in the policy and to be considered more thoroughly through master planning and at the time of planning application. I think there was a point, but just points relation to flooding in relation to Birch Brook and drainage and climate change considerations. Again, these are all elements that will be considered with the required information that will be properly assessed and fully transparent at the time when planning applications done as part of the master planning. The point about the just generally viability, again, the legal obligations I think I mentioned in relation to biodiversity net gain is something that I think I've covered. And I think the policy as proposed with the modifications is incredibly detailed, but I don't, it provides a very clear steer and strong framework for any developer to need to comply with, but it's not considered that anything in that policy is necessarily overly onerous to potentially render any of those deliverables or the development unviable. And in terms of looking at mechanisms for managing both the ecological areas and the open space, which is now again has been suggested to be included in the policy. There are lots of examples of other developments and proposals and applications around not too far away, where all sorts of models and mechanisms are successfully developed, working with communities, trusts, nature trust, wildlife trust, land trusts, and the like, that we can learn from and could easily be applied to the Middleweight development. And I think the other points, just generally about taking the allocation out of the plan. Karen might want to add something on this, but I think these modifications are the inspector's modifications. They're not, it's not, a case of we like some, we don't like others. And the reality of the alternatives of not going forward with the modifications, including this allocation, are that we were not able to proceed with the progress on the plan, which would leave us in an extremely vulnerable position, which might be a useful point for Karen to come in and talk about the issue in relation to the housing number questions that were asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I move on to housing, just a couple of other points I think it's important to mention. There are always examples of developments where circumstances have changed and policies might not be complied with, but for the most part, they are. And the best way of ensuring that those policies are complied with is by having an adopted local plan. I think Sandra's explained the use of the bespoke metric, and we've been over that in detail before. But please be assured, as I think one of the speakers said, we won't be using ECOS again for our ecology work. We will be using an independent advisor. I'd also point out that the bespoke metric, the metric 3, which I think was also mentioned, which Natural England are looking to introduce, Natural England have actually announced that they need to reconsult on that, because several, both experts and academics, have previously and recently said that it's not fit for purpose. Starting the local plan again is not just based on a financial consideration, although there's a recent withdrawal of a plan by Rutland County Council, which they've acknowledged cost them 1.2 million to get to this stage. They're going to withdraw it, and it's going to cost another 1.4 million pounds if they do that. As I said, it's not only about financial considerations. What they've also acknowledged is that it's likely to be 2025 before they have an adopted plan. So that means they're without an adopted policy until that stage. And think that they are only planning to meet the housing target of 130 homes a year, not our 920. I think most of us would probably think that would be considerably easier if we only had to plan for 130 homes a year. So turning then to housing and the housing numbers, it's true that on paper there is a surplus. However, that surplus only exists if every single unit on every single site is built out by 2033. That in the real world is unlikely to happen. We can probably all name sites, the Odeon springs to mind, where we think development will take place, and actually it takes longer than we expected. We have to factor that in. We can't just plan for a minimum number. And I think a recent appeal decision in West Bergholt has reinforced that point, because that's exactly what the inspector suggested. If sites were deallocated, then that would involve a process in its own right. And I would suspect people in Mersey and people in Langham might feel hard done by. Others might think the garden community shouldn't have progressed. So it's hard to single out individual sites, especially at this late stage in the process. Some could say that the MOD have actually played more fairly by waiting for the plan-led system to run its course rather than getting in applications earlier. As Sandra said, we can't pick and choose which allocations we want to accept. These are the inspector's modifications, and this was a plan that we considered to be sound when we submitted it. Thank you.
I've got one speaker from the panel, but then I've got two more speakers in person tonight, and that's Sir Bob Russell and William Jolliffe. So, Lewis.
Thanks, Chair. Only just to thank the officers for their comments on the public responses, but just for the benefit of people, I guess, watching, if anybody's watching, that members will probably have their say when it comes to the item agenda, and we're not neglecting the points raised at this stage. We'll be addressing them, I'm sure, and I'll be giving my thoughts at the item agenda itself. So we're not ignoring, they'll be discussed shortly.
This is the process, because we've had so many written submissions because of the COVID process, and that's why we're doing it in this way, to be as fair as possible. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Sandra. So now it's Sir Bob Russell, please. I don't need to tell you times, dates and whatever, because you invented them, didn't you, Bob?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Well, I've heard it all now, that you build 1,000 houses on Middleweight in order to increase the biodiversity and the ecology. If you fall for that, you'll fall for anything. I took part in the planning inquiry, and I have to say the experts who supported building on the houses in environmental terms, they were shot to pieces by the Essex Wildlife Trust, the Cultural and Natural History Society, and another environmental group whose names I've forgotten. So I don't know who these independent people are, but I don't trust them. I just don't trust them. The coalescence of Old Heath and Beerchurch should be prevented at all costs. Quite frankly, Chairman, on Middlewick, Colchester Borough Council has failed the people of Colchester, past, present, future. Now, I recognise that in 2016, the government, Ministry of Defence Infrastructure Organisation, they're the villains of the piece, because if they hadn't decided to do what they've done to shut the firing range, you wouldn't be having this debate now. But I get the strong impression the whole debate of the local plan is numbers. And here is an easy 1,000. The MOD wanted 2,000. I thought the council had pulled a blinder by cutting it to 1,000. However, within minutes of that local plan inquiry starting, it became blatantly clear to me that the Borough Council had rings run around them by the MOD and their advisors. The Borough Council should have said no. I know it's the government who wants to do it. There's enough evidence there to say this land should not be developed. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of the Essex Wildlife Trust. Take the evidence of the Colchester Natural History Society. People who are passionate about Colchester, they weren't being paid there as paid witnesses to come up with the storyline that suited the developers or the MOD. So I say to the local plan committee, the new administration so far has, as far as I can see, there's no bulldozers on Alumno. And I think the new administration could try and see how they can stop Middlewick. You saw the protest outside. You've had all the people giving evidence here. Nobody wants it. Who in Colchester wants 1,000 houses on Middlewick? You are the elected representatives. Call in the MP and get him to get the government to call it off. And if they won't do that, then I hope the Essex Wildlife Trust and others will pursue this through the legal channels, because this document allowing 1,000 houses on Middlewick should be stopped. Colchester does not want a coalescence on Middlewick. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Bob. Can I take the last speaker and then you respond to both? Yeah. Okay, so I've got William Jolliffe, please. You have 3 minutes, William, and the bell will sound at 2. Sorry, can you press the button?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Well, I've lived on Mersey Road all my life, and I can honestly say that if Middlewick went over to housing, that would be absolutely catastrophic to not only Colchester, but the whole of the area. It's a beautiful site. I've been over there for various walks this summer, and the area has become even more natural. There's trees growing through, there are butterflies, birds everywhere. And do you know, with this pandemic, that's even become even more popular with local people. They've been able to go over there for quiet walks, clear their minds. What on earth are people thinking about to concrete that area? Be absolutely catastrophic. The roads can't cope now. I'm on Mersey Road and there's traffic all the time. Abbott's Road's the same, that's a rat run. Old Heath Road. It really would be terrible. And I honestly thought when I came here tonight, I might hear good news that Middlewick had been taken off the local plan. But no, it's not a local plan. The plan has been taken by people many, many miles away from Colchester. And it's very, very bad. And there's nobody local that wants it. So I really do trust and pray that that can, you know, that can be kept as it is. You know, it's a beautiful area and so much importance to Colchester. I don't know whether Essex Highways have thoroughly looked into the traffic situation, but I mean, that junction coming from Old Heath Road into Abbott's Road, you've got the school there, and I mean, it's diabolical now. The lollipop lady has difficulty with the traffic. She gets abuse, and also the chap that does it. It's very, you know, it really is awful. So I just trust, you know, that this people can really hope that they can get this thing taken off the plan. Whether it can, we can only hope that it can be. And another thing is so much heavy traffic is using that road now. I think Abbott's Road is used as a rat run. You've got trucks coming over from the Hythe. They go a shortcut over to the A12. And, you know, it really is terrible. So I hope, you know, you all here can really put your minds to it and put pay to it once and for all. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Woodall. Right, so Karen, would you like to sum up on the last two speakers, and then I'll call Bethany forward?
Thank you. Yes, just a couple of points really to say, you know, there's normally constraints on any site that's to be allocated, and what we have to do is try to address those constraints. You know, I mentioned the garden community that had high quality agricultural land. There's water issues in Langham. So we need, you know, we do have to take all those issues into account. And I can't deny that there is a focus on housing numbers, but that's what we're tasked with doing. And that's what we have to address. And nobody local wants any development. I don't think it's just Middlewick. Nobody wants development, but we do have to allocate it. It has to go somewhere, or it would be a free-for-all. And I don't think anyone in this room would welcome that.
Thank you very much. So now if I could bring forward Bethany Jones to present the report, please. Welcome, Bethany.
Good evening, everyone. As members are aware, the Colchester Local Plan was submitted to the Secretary of State in October 2017. The Section 1 Local Plan was adopted by the Council in February this year, which provides the overarching strategy for North Essex, including policies for the tendering Colchester Borders garden community. The Section 2 Local Plan contains policies and allocations for the entire Colchester Borough. The Section 2 Local Plan is being examined by a government-appointed inspector to determine if the plan is legally compliant and meets the 4 tests of soundness outlined in the NPPF. The inspector held virtual public hearing sessions over a 2-week period in April and has now confirmed to the Council the modifications he has recommended to the plan for soundness before the plan can proceed to adoption. The inspector has not asked for any additional sites to be included in the local plan or for any sites to be removed. As we've already heard this evening, the inspector has retained the allocation at Middlewick, but has recommended significant changes to the policy and the supporting text. The modifications reflect the need to balance the constraints and opportunities associated with the sites. Policy requirements linked to transport, access and sustainable travel, ecology, open space and the importance of master planning are key to the revised policy. This will ensure that the community are engaged with the master plan process with opportunities to shape and influence the development. The Council will have control of the master planning details, working with third parties to ensure that any development delivered on the site maximises the site potential for everyone. A large number of the modifications reflect those broadly put forward by officers. These were in response to representations received to the publication draft consultation in summer 2017 through updated evidence or to reflect the passage of time since submission of the plan. The full list of main modifications by the inspector is attached to the report as Appendix A. Some key modifications are including requirements for wintering bird surveys for several residential allocations as recommended in the Habitats Regulations Assessment, updates to table SG2 Colchester housing provision to remove the Colchester Braintree Borders garden community in accordance with the adopted Section 1 local plan and to provide the most up-to-date housing figures upon adoption. Clarity is also provided in policy SG8 neighbourhood plans that once a neighbourhood plan becomes part of the development plan, once it's made, it becomes part of the development plan. Policy EMV1 Environment and the supporting text now provide reference to biodiversity net gain, the Essex Coast Rams, irreplaceable habitats and the countryside. A new requirement has been added to policy CC1 climate change for a tree canopy cover assessment to be provided for all major applications. The mix of uses that would be supported in the town centre are now reflected in policy TC1, town centre policy and hierarchy, in accordance with the greater flexibility provided in national policy. Policies for 8 Ash Green, West Burgle and Wivenhoe reflect that neighbourhood plans have been made in these parishes since submission of the local plan. Policy SS14 Tiptree and the supporting text reflects the granting of permission on appeal for 200 dwellings at Barbrook Lane and clarified that the neighbourhood plan will deliver a minimum of 400 dwellings. The main modifications are now required to be published for a 6-week public consultation. An update to both the sustainability appraisal and habitats regulations assessment are being prepared by consultants LUC to assess the social, economic and environmental impacts of the Section 2 local plan as proposed to be modified by the inspector's modifications. These reports will also be published for consultation alongside the modifications. Officers have also prepared a schedule of additional modifications which are minor and are either factual, correct spelling and grammar, or are required as a result of a main modification. These are attached to the report as Appendix B. Similarly, officers have prepared a schedule of modifications to the policies maps attached to the report at Appendix C. In the interest of transparency and completeness, these will also be published for the consultation. The 6-week consultation will likely take place between October and November this year, which is limited to the modifications only. The consultation is not an opportunity to repeat or raise further representations about the published plan or to seek changes to the plan. The consultation will largely be based online. Letters and emails will be sent to all those on our local plan database, and all consultation documents will be published on the council's website. Responses can be made via the online consultation portal, via email, or can be sent via post, and hard copies will also be available to view at the town centre library. All comments received during the consultation will be sent to the inspector for his consideration before he can come to a final decision whether the Section 2 local plan with those modifications is sound and can be adopted by the council.
Thank you, Bethany. I have Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Bethany and Karen. Thank you for the report. Thank you, Chair. I thought it was important to make a comment on this aspect of the plan, having been now on the local plan committee for about over 4 years, and sitting in the meeting in which councillors submitted this plan to the inspector. I completely understand Mr. Jolliffe's comments about feeling this is a plan that's been imposed on us from afar. However, sorry. The truth is worse, actually, because it was members in this room that submitted it to the planning inspector, because I was there. I voted against submitting it to the planning inspector, but local members were the ones who submitted it. The bulk of it, except for as amended this evening, to the planning inspector for consideration. They voted to support that. And ultimately, responsibility does have to rest with the decisions that members make. There's a lot of members who say they're opposed to items and policies until it comes to voting. It's quite amusing how that happens, as we saw in the February 2021 full council meeting when an amendment came up on a feasibility study for alternatives to Middlewick. And not many members put their money where their mouths were then, who claimed they were against Middlewick. But that's a slight aside. I wanted to just draw on some of the amendments to the Middlewick policy in here, because I actually think that looking at the amendments to the policy on Middlewick here this evening, that Middlewick will probably be one of those ones that, even if it was eventually included in the local plan, it'd be one of those sites that just wouldn't be viable to take forward. I'm particularly pleased to see an amendment on a transport assessment raised by the inspector, because I think that's really important, because clearly the infrastructure around Middlewick could not cope with that level of housing. I think that's quite clear to see. The vote this evening will be on sending these amendments to consultation. I'm happy to send them to consultation because I know I will have another vote on the local plan itself and its future following that. I know I'll have a vote to recommend the plan to be decided at full council. I think that's very important because ultimately councillors are elected by their communities and they should nail their colours to the mast as to where they stand. And I don't think we should shirk away from how we voted in the past. And I don't think we should shirk away from the decisions we're going to make in the future. And there's members in this room who will have to make a decision in the future. And my view is that at the earliest opportunity, this council should review the local plan and review sites such as Middleweight to ensure that they reflect what the population of Kilshaw would like to see within the national framework we've been set. But I don't think the decisions that have been made in this local plan document reflect what local people want. I would like to see a local plan that reflects more neighbour plans and is community led. And right now, I don't think that's the case. And that's why I voted against it in 2017. That's why I don't think I've actually ever voted for the local plan in any capacity, thinking about it. And as far as I'm aware, this is a plan of the past, and I want the administration going forward, I want this committee and this council to reevaluate at the earliest opportunity the plan we have in front of us, because I don't think it's actually good enough to be frank. What we've got in front of us now. That is said, we are sort of stuck where we are, and that's a bit of a problem. As I said, when we came to the section 1 vote, I'm not too happy with progressing the plan, but I know that we're probably going to have to get to a point where we vote on it in full council and decide then. But I would like a review to start as soon as possible to start reevaluating some of these sites. My view has always been that we shouldn't be including sites such as Middleweight without the master planning work really having been done. Because if anything, was it Rutford example, the county council, all that money spent getting a plan and then having to spend to do it all again, I think that reflects the fact we need to listen to voices in the community early on, because actually they do tend to, as West Hay showed, know quite a bit more than often I feel they're given credit for. And so I think that's not a risk. I think that's just a reflection of how planning has been done for too long, how this council has been run for too long. And I hope that going forward, once this plan gets to full council and we know the outcome of it, we can move forward with a new plan that reflects what people want. So I think that's really how I feel about the matter. But I want to say that because actually I think it's important elected members give their point of view. We've heard a lot of the technical aspects, but it's important that elected members let their communities know where they stand on matters. And I think too often councillors shirk behind how they vote and aren't honest. And I sat in this room in 2017, and I've heard for years since people say, oh, I didn't want to vote like that. You didn't have to vote like that. And I think that's frustrating. And I feel frustrated because a lot of us warned about problems that were with the plan from an early stage. And I see it all over again here with Middleweight. I see it on the Garden community on the east. I saw it on the west. It's just repeating itself. And I hope at the earliest opportunity we address it. But we are where we are at the moment on section 2. So I think that's one of the reasons as well I wanted to decouple section 1 and 2, because actually there was and I remember saying there was a lot of challenges with section 2 that by the all-encompassing work that section 1 took over, we ended up as an authority, I feel, neglecting. I mean, things such as transport assessment really should have been done straight out, but there we are. I'll probably send it to consultation because I want people to have their say, but I'm not particularly happy with the plan. Thanks.
Karen, do you want to say anything to that?
I think it's more a political point probably, but.
So I have next is Julie Young. Councillor.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've written my questions down, so I make them as specific as I possibly can. So can I ask officers whether we can clarify which organisation the independent ecological assessment came from? If it was Essex Wildlife Trust, why did they attend to speak against Middleweight at the inquiry? Could we take out Middleweight as protesters want? If we could take it out and the MOD submitted a planning application for the site, what is your assessment of the likely success of that application were it to go to appeal? i.e., can we guarantee that it won't be built on if it isn't in the plan? Can officers clarify whether there is 50,000 budget to fund a feasibility study to create country parks at Middleweight and other sites in the borough? I don't think at that meeting, that budget meeting, there was the option to suggest doing something different on Middleweight. That is a matter for the local plan committee. But I wanted some clarification around the budget for country parks, because I believe there is budget for that. And this is a question to you, Chair. Can we call the MP to attend a local plan meeting so the committee can express their views on the sale of the site and potential development at Middleweight?
Personally, I'm more than happy to invite the MP to attend the next available local plan meeting. Happy to do that, if that's the committee's wish. Yeah,
I support that, Chair.
okay. Right. Sorry, I've got other speakers first.
Chair, could I get the answers to the questions, please? The other questions.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. Right, okay, so Andrea.
Yeah, I'm pressing the wrong button now. Right, forgive me if I've missed some of these out because they were quite quick. I can clarify that ECOS, who are the commercial arm of Essex Wildlife Trust, were our independent ecologists on Middleweight, and they've acted for us on a number of other schemes. We can't take out Middleweight in isolation. If a planning application was submitted, I can't give you the likelihood of an appeal being successful because it would depend on many other factors. But the fact that an independent inspector has considered that it can be an allocation will weigh in its favour. I certainly can't guarantee that there will not be any housing on that site. In terms of whether there's £50,000 to create country parks, there's £50,000 to carry out master planning for Middleweight. I think hopefully that's what you meant rather than create a country park. We're keen that that development does provide a country park or some form of strategic open space that residents, both new and existing, can enjoy. And reducing the numbers by half will give us sufficient land to be able to do that. Was it? I think I might have missed out a question in the middle, sorry.
No, I think, Chair, that's all the questions answered. Thank you very much.
I have Councillor Andrea Luxembourg next.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, acknowledge we've been talking a lot about Middleweight, and I too think it's bonkers to be building on such a rare and important habitat. And I think it's heightened my interest in green issues because of the Section 1 policy and having to learn very, very fast about complicated things like habitat, whatever it is, assessment, et cetera, but that particular example it just seems so extreme. I also wanted to add to what Councillor Barber had said. I've only just joined this committee. I've never voted for the plan. And I just, for the record, I think it's quite important to acknowledge that some people didn't and have personally suffered because of that. I think there are two areas that are fed into Section 2, and one, and both in the capacity as a parish councillor, but I think it's relevant to discuss it tonight. One is in making representations directly to the Section 1 and Section 2 consultations. And the other one was via the support and the creation of a neighbourhood plan. And then persuading residents that that was a good idea, and that, following on from your comment, Karen, of course they don't want development, but at least if we have some control of where it goes and what the local benefits are of that, that it surely is more palatable than having it forced upon us. What I'm desperately upset about is, having got hold of Section 2 policy and focusing on some of the policies that are directly fed into, or not upset. I was delighted to see that actually the inspector has taken on board quite a lot of what we set out to him, and reassured me that for once, using the correct procedure, as in responding to a consultation, has created policy that actually is pretty tough. I won't bore everybody with reading it out, but I am quite an anorak with policy, and there are at least four I can see in front of me that directly relate to the ward which I represent. What does concern me, though, is that we seem to be under siege in Wivenhoe. We have 4 independent development sites all coming in at the same time, all of which, well, no, 3 of which do not comply with our neighbourhood plan. Only one of them is at a planning application stage. So the first thing I did when I saw this policy was send an email off to the officer working on it and said, great, look, here we go. The neighbourhood plan is now part of the development plan. Here is the policy that you have been asking for, and it's a very credible and sound material planning ground to reject this planning application, and was told that because it's new policy and introduced by inspector, it doesn't carry the same weight as the policy that's been around since 2017. I just need to say to officers, and first of all, my question is, why are we doing that when there is no national kind of guidelines telling us that we should? Why would an inspector, who always has the final say on planning applications, not have greater weight in terms of him thinking it needs to be included? And I've forgotten the last thing. Oh, yeah. What is the point of a neighbourhood plan? I mean, it's, obviously I'm talking about specifically to Wivenhoe because I know the details very well, but we're all trying to do them. They cost a lot of money. They take a lot of time. They involve lots of officer time, but also lay people sitting down and becoming experts in planning just in order to write policy. If after all of that effort and getting it through a referendum, they're ignored, they are pointless. We might as well just tear them up. And obviously I've got a great deal of personal investment in this, but I'm sure other councillors will support the idea that, when we're actually playing along and playing the game and saying, yeah, okay, we'll take some development, that has to be respected. The policy saying it should be respected. Can officers reassure me that it will be?
Do you want to take that, Karen, or do you want Sandra?
I'm going to ask Sandra at least to do the first part about the status of the draft policies, because it's quite a complicated matter.
Okay.
And if Sandra's not already done so, she is going to circulate a note to councillors about the status.
Yeah. I haven't done so, but I will do so. The reason I haven't is because it's not black and white, and it's not one size fits all. It does depend on the extent of where the modification has, at what stage in the process really the modification has emerged. and the extent to which it's entirely new as a result of the examination, or if it, in which case the weight that can be applied has to be fairly limited, at least until we've been through the consultation to gauge the likelihood of it being potentially further amended by the later stage in the process when the inspector considers those representations that will be made to the modifications. For those modifications that have perhaps less sort of entirely new, if you like, and are based on either more, I think the word more straightforward tweaks that perhaps improves the wording of the policy, add clarity, make it clearer, avoid any, remove any ambiguity, or put forward policy in a more robust way, but it's not new intention or new content, then they will have already been subject to some debate and some consultation and some consideration at examination. So in those cases, I think we would suggest that more weight could be applied in decision making at this stage in the process, because they've already been subject to some debate and examination. When the note goes round, I will give some examples that, you know, that help explain the relative weight. But I think that's where we are with that in terms of decisions that are to be made or due to be made fairly immediately. As I indicated, once we've been through assuming we proceed to consultation, that gives us another measure to apply as to the extent of weight that can be given, which is based on the guidance that the MPPF sets out about what weight you should give to emerging policy. It depends on a number of factors, one of which is the level of objection that is on the table to the proposed, whatever the emerging policy is. So I think once we've got through that, assuming we proceed, we'll be able to make a different judgment potentially on some of those policies, modifications. I may have confused you, I didn't intend to, but hopefully when I summarise it, it will provide greater clarity.
Andrea wants to come back.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's going to be too late for us, and that's my problem. I don't see the justification for doing it. I asked for an example of where we'd do anywhere else in the country where we would do that. I'm just, you know, you say about changes to the inspector's modifications. My only experience of mods is section 1, which was, you know, kind of a big deal considering the size of the development. But I can't think of one significant change that the inspector made after it went to consultation. So is there an example where something would come out? I can't see why the inspector that's put a modification in, I mean, no one's going to object. Basically, no one is going to object to anything that strengthens policy. So I don't see there's justification for being objections. It would only be individual developers that would do that. You're certainly not going to get objections from the public if it's actually tough enough, robust policy that it's going to do what it's supposed to do. So I just don't see the justification, and I don't understand why we're doing it and nobody else does.
Karen?
It's contained within the National Planning Policy Framework, the weight we can afford to policies, to local plans as they progress through to adoption, and that weight changes over time. If Andrea contacts me separately, I'll look at the individual policies that are relevant to that site in the first instance to try and give some more clarity on those, and we'll send round the more sort of generalised note as well.
Thank you. I'm just going to make a comment before I bring in Adam, who's the next speaker. and that is over the years, I can remember them all, regardless of government, colour, we had Severals Hospital deemed to be surplus to requirements that automatically became brownfield site for housing, and it's got multiple thousands on it now. St Mary's Hospital, the same. Essex County Hospital, the same. Hyderabad Barracks, Miani Barracks, they then built Merville, but now you've got Middleweight where the MOD say it's surplus to requirements, so then they sell it. And the only reason governments of whatever colour do that is because they receive the capital receipt into the Chancellor's satchel. Yes, sorry, Karen.
I've just written down a note I was supposed to say in response to someone earlier, Gerard, and your comments have just reminded me what I was going to say. That as the local planning authority, we can, of course, only allocate sites. We're not responsible for the disposal of those sites. So that will be down to the MOD, not the council.
I was trying to get through that a lot of people don't understand. A lot of this is forced on us, and then we have limited powers to stop anything in that respect. Councillor Fox, you're next.
Thank you very much, Chair. And in fact, I was going to make some very similar points to the one that you've just made, because ultimately a local plan is about allocating sites for houses to meet government targets. We're legally required as a council to produce a plan, but apart from allocating any of the limited land owned by the council, it's beholden on to private landowners and developers to put forward sites. And without those sites, we can't deliver on those housing numbers. And of course, one of those big landowners in Colchester over the years has been the Ministry of Defence. And, you know, I think a lot of people would look at the amount of Ministry of Defence land that has already been developed and say, well, they've done pretty well out of Colchester, actually. And I know that people in Colchester feel very proud about their support for the armed forces here as well, and always feel like we try to do our bit to stand by them. And I think there are lots of people who live in the south of Colchester, in and around Middlewick, who feel that they're not being repaid for that support at the moment. And frankly, for me, you know, what I've always felt about the local plan process, particularly here in Colchester, is that we're over a barrel. And the government's got us over a barrel, both through the planning system and through the Ministry of Defence and its development arm, the DIO. And over the last, decade or so, the planning system through the MPPF has been watered down time after time, limiting local communities in having any meaningful say on development in their area. It's focused on delivering that government target of 300,000 houses a year, disregarding the type of housing and allowing anyone who can to make as much money out of any piece of land that they want to. And in fact, just in the past week, we've seen the government department responsible, that was the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, change its name and scrapped local government out of its name, which just gives me the indication that they don't really care about local government. They don't really care about the voice that local government has in the planning system. And lots of people have turned up over the years that we've gone through the planning and the local plan process and come here and said that they wanted more housing on Middlewick because they didn't want housing in their own wards, in their own areas. And I'm a bit surprised to hear Councillor Barber say he's happy to include Middlewick in the plan now, although of course he was one of those that called for more houses on it because he thinks it won't be built upon. But once it's in the plan, it's in the plan. And we know that even sites that aren't in the local plan get built on. So, having a site in the local plan ultimately, means that it is there to be developed. And I was a bit surprised that he also said that master planning should be completed before it's included in the local plan. Master planning a site before it's included in a local plan would only result it being included in the local plan. You know, once you've master planned a site for housing, it's in the local plan. It's going to be included in the local plan then. And so, you know, all of his comments, I think, would just end up with a Middlewick being built on. And the only way it won't get built on is if the Ministry of Defence decides doesn't want to get built on, which is why so many people have been calling on the government not to sell the land and calling on the local MP to use his influence to ensure that happens. I just wanted to cover a few points because I think there were some really important contributions from local residents in the Have Your Say section, and one of those was by Nick Chilvers around jobs and employment land. But I think, you know, as much as employment land is allocated in the local plan, there's very little control again that we as a local council can have on that process. You know, the main thrust of the local plan is about house building and achieving those numbers. And as much as many of us would like to see a plan that did direct some of that more, it's just not within our power. The power is in the hands of the developers, and the government give them that power. The government could decide to limit the power of developers, could decide to limit the power of landowners, and it chooses not to. And we all know just how much money has been donated by developers to the current governing party at a national level. One of the things that I thought was really useful in terms of the officers contributing was talking about the number of houses that are necessary, and that not every site does get built out. And we know there are lots of sites in Colchester that have been in the local plan for many years, but that haven't got built out as well. And I just wanted to comment on Sir Bob Russell and his comments to the committee as well. And I think he's absolutely right. I watched the evidence provided at the hearings, and I think there was strong evidence from Essex Wildlife Trust, the Colchester Natural History Society, local councillors, Sir Bob Russell himself, in terms of the complexity of the Middlewick site. And I know that lots of people put their faith in the government inspector to change the local plan more significantly, and are disappointed that that has not happened. And I think that just goes to show that the rules are stacked against us in this regard. And you know, ultimately on Middlewick, I think that it's the government that have failed the people of Colchester, and the DIO who need to go back to the drawing board and listen to the strength of voice in the local community, and to ultimately take that site off the table.
I'm just going to come in at that point and turn around and say successive governments of whatever colour have all done it. So it's not the Conservatives' fault, it's not Labour's fault, it's happened. I mean, Turner Village, for instance, Severals Hospital was under Gordon Brown, and so on. So they've all done it. I mean, one of the other gripes I have is developers spend money to buy land to develop, and pre-COVID, they were buying land at $1 million an acre in our neck of the woods. And then after the pandemic, it's now $500,000 an acre. And then they claim they can't afford to develop it. So therefore the communities lose out on any form of affordable housing and any infrastructure, because the developer cries wolf and say, I can't afford it. It's not viable. They made it non-viable by paying stupid money for the land. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox, sorry. Lewis Barber.
Thanks, Chair. I'm a bit fed up with members sort of abdicating responsibility all the time, just saying it's government. I mean, if they can't really do anything, they can always hand back their allowances, resign and let someone else stand for election and have a go representing their communities. The simple fact of the matter is Councillor Fox undermined his own position because he realised what he was doing because he slowed down and stumbled when he said that by putting a site in the plan, it's the one sure way of getting it developed. Well, that's what happened on 12th of June 2017 when it was submitted to the inspector, and Councillor Fox was one of those members on the committee who voted to submit the plan with the allocation in. And that's an argument that a number of us have made, is that it makes no sense for those who advocate to protect Middleweight to put it in the local plan, because that is one sure way you are going to get it developed. And I'm on the local council, so I'm not an MP, I'm not dealing with government, I'm dealing with the allocations of sites in the local plan. And Councillor Fox said that the only way that the site cannot be developed is if the MOD withdrew it. That's not true, because loads of landowners put forward their sites in the call for sites, and we dismiss numerous sites and they don't get developed as a result because they're not then allocated for housing. But the one sure way of housing, of a site being developed, is by putting it in the local plan and going forward with it as a site. So I don't really understand the point that was trying to be made. I think you undermined your own argument and you realise you did it. However, I also did not say that I think Middleweight should now be included in the plan. I said that if it is, I think there are so many constraints on it that it will never go forward. In the same way, I'm still dubious as to whether the East Garden community will ever be built. And go ahead, I have questions on that as a similar sort of situation. So I just want to be clear on the points that were just raised by Councillor Fox, because I think too often, just because the government own the land, from a planning perspective, it is attempted to be viewed as differently. However, from a planning perspective, we can allocate it as a site or not. We have that decision. Okay, people can challenge the plan. We know landowners can challenge the plan. That's not unique with the fact that it's the MOD. It's true that through a public sector organisation, we may have more say on whether that site is put forward in the first place or not, but we never had to allocate it for housing. That's not true at all. And if we hadn't allocated for housing, as has always already been referred to by officers, the MOD actually haven't challenged the plan as yet. They haven't jumped the gun as some developers, even in my ward, have done. So there's no evidence actually that the MOD would have challenged the plan and tried to get 2,000 homes. So this weird perverse logic whereby we put it in the plan to protect this site, that makes no sense, and then blame government. But too many members here just think, well, let's blame government, I'll pat myself on the back and go home. I think elected representatives should take more responsibility for their votes, even if they were 4 years ago.
I wasn't blaming government.
Not you.
I was merely stating a fact.
Not you, Chair. Other members throughout the council, not all here this evening, but too long, it does my head in actually. Just give your allowance up if you can't.
Chair, with respect, we're discussing policy here in the local plan committee, not the behaviour of members and what they've done in the past.
Well, actually, it's important. You may want to shirk from your votes, but
Chair, could you take control of the meeting, please?
Karen, could I ask you a question, please? Had the Middlewick not been put in an allocation, what chances that the MOD would have been able to sell it and it get a permission if it wasn't in our local plan?
I think before we got to that stage, I think they would have challenged for local plan. By the time they went public on their intention to dispose of the site, then they made their intentions clear, and they would have pursued that through the local plan process in the first instance, and then possibly through an application, which, I can't comment on the likelihood of success of that application.
Is it relating to the report, Adam? I think we're done with that subject, aren't we? I mean, otherwise it's backwards and forwards with political.
I just wanted to make the point that we don't live in a bubble here in Colchester, and that you know, we do have responsibilities as a local authority, but we don't exist in isolation. And if we don't use the mechanisms that exist in order to influence the bodies and the individuals that make decisions at a national level, then we are not doing our job as representatives of our residents. And so from that point of view, it's not about shirking responsibility. It's about using the responsibility that's been given to us by the electorate here in Colchester to make our views known to members of parliament or the government or the government's bodies in order to do our best for our local residents. And from that point of view, I'm not afraid to call out and to write letters and to ask for changes to be made to national policy as and when I think that they're necessary. I think perhaps if others did that a bit more often, we might get some better changes.
But we are dealing with our own policy tonight, not government policy tonight. And just gentleman in the public had his hand up. Once they've had their say, they don't have right to come back. So I'm just letting you know for that reason. Any other speakers on this item? If not, sorry. Councillor Hagan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to go on. I'm new to this this committee, and I've been watching from a distance for the last couple of years. I do have a couple of questions, regarding the Middleweight site. It does concern me that it was ever thought to have been put into the local plan. You just look at the amount of traffic that my own ward in Stanway has to deal with on a daily level, and you just go, well, why the heck would you do that? If you look at the some of the documents, I did have one open on here. It's the statement of common ground for Middleweight Rangers. The number of amendments to the road network in the local area, including a hamburger designed roundabout at the Grinstead roundabout. I mean, I had to Google what that was. I got quite hungry. I went down McDonald's, bought a cheeseburger earlier. But it just shows you the amount of development that's going to have to take place around Colchester, because this site has been added into the local plan prior to this year. You know, it was done so by the previous administration. I do have a question that I'll just ask, and I think actually the chair's asked it, but it does tick something else that I won't bring forward now. But if a site is not in the local plan, how likely is it that it will get planning permission should one come forward with another site that hasn't been agreed? Because obviously the local plan is designed for a reason, in my view. It's there to protect Colchester and so forth. And actually, the clues in the name, it's plan. If we have other sites coming forward, you know, what are the likelihoods of those being accepted for development, those major applications? We're not talking about the smaller sites. So the question there is, actually, if I remember rightly, the statement on the MOD site at the time said the site was brought forward as potential for housing, or words to that effect. It didn't say we're going to build on this and this is what you should do. So I just don't understand why no one thought, you know what, this is one of the lungs in Colchester that we have left. Let's not build on it, or at least if we're planning to build on it, why don't we look at buying it and just holding on to it for a bit and just see what goes on there. I don't know why it was added. Yeah, but that does interest me, as if there's that question, if a site is not added to the local plan, could one be brought forward at a later date once the local plan's been adopted and said, you know, we want to build on this? Thank you.
Karen, another one for you. I think you.
Another two, I think. 1,000 dwellings on Middleweight, 1,000 dwellings elsewhere in the borough. There'll be an impact on infrastructure. There'll be junction works required, whether it's at the hamburger roundabout at Grinstead or the bottom of Brook Street or the roundabout by the Rovers Tie. That was another site put forward off St John's Road. 700 dwellings, 900 dwellings, I think, from memory. Not all of them in Colchester, but that would have had an impact on Colchester and on the infrastructure in Colchester. That one wasn't included. So there are decisions that have to be taken, and we have to look at the evidence that we have available. And that's what we did in respect of this local plan. How likely are unallocated sites to get planning permission? I haven't got a crystal ball. Each one is looked at on its merits. We've lost 2 appeals in Colchester, residential appeals, one recently in West Burgolt, and in fairness, officers recommended approval there, but we did win an appeal originally. And we were disappointed to lose the appeal recently. The other one, and more disappointing, was 200 units in Tiptree. We lost that because the inspector didn't consider we had a housing supply. You only get a housing supply by having a local plan. So there's all sorts of circumstances and timing issues which influence how likely a site is to get planning permission. So I can't give you a percentage figure or anything like that, I'm afraid. I can, outside of this meeting, tell you what our record is with success on appeals, but I think we've been in a fortunate position because despite what 1 or 2 inspectors might have said, we have maintained a 5-year supply and we have delivered housing and we have maintained a local plan. So that's put us in a good position. But I think that's as far as I can advise you on the likelihood of success.
In the process though, Karen, would when we do the review in a few years' time, there is a possibility that some could come out and some could be added at that point, but that would again be part of the process going forward. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct. This time around, members will be aware we carried quite a lot of sites forward from the last local plan, some from the local plan before that, I think, because they were considered suitable for development, but they haven't come forward. So we have to check the deliverability and developability and achievability of every site that goes into that local plan. So if a site is considered not to meet any of those requirements, then we couldn't include it. So any review would identify that.
Thank you. I've got one final speaker before we go to the decision side of things. Councillor Julie Young.
Thank you, Chair. This may be a bit of a wild card, and I'm not sure anybody in the room will have the answer, but I'll have a go. We've always been very proud of our Armed Forces Covenant, and I think Councillor Fox indicated, and I think we'd all agree, that we have an awful lot of ex-servicemen still living in Colchester, and we're very proud of our links with the garrison, and we've got, a very lively Armed Forces Covenant. I wondered, I'm sure it doesn't have any bearing on planning policy, but whether that's something, Chair, that maybe you could have a look at to see what commitments are in that Armed Forces Covenant in terms of access to open space, because a lot of the military personnel that will have served us in the past live in and around the area that actually probably use Middleweight in terms of their recreation and their well-being. As I say, it may be a bit of a wild card, but it might be worth us having a look at that.
I will investigate. Right, we are now. You just scraped in, haven't you?
Yeah, just a quick one, really. It's been mentioned tonight and beforehand about lobbying to get the sale withdrawn from the MOD. Now, is there any precedent anyway, if someone could look, in the last 5-10 years where the MOD has actually withdrawn it? Because I feel that if that's not the case, where across the UK, the MOD have never withdrawn a potential sale, where people are wasting time in the current time frame to have that as an option. And we could need to be channeling those energies elsewhere. It's great to lobby for the future to make sure that doesn't happen. But in the short term, if there's no precedent that the MOD have ever pulled out of any sale, I think it's something that we can't really keep on the table as an option going forward.
I don't know the answer, but I'm going to ask. Karen, are you aware of any anywhere in the country? No, the answer is no. So tonight, 1.3 is the main modifications recommended by the planning inspector must be published for a 6-week public consultation before the inspector can then write his final report and the plan subsequently can be adopted. The decisions we have is 2.1, it's recommended that the local plan committee, 2.2, note the planning inspector's recommended main modifications for the purposes of soundness attached as Appendix A. So we're asked to note. So I'm going to move and ask Mr. Clifford if he will deal with the vote for us. Do you want to take each one, 2, 3, 2, 4 separately or jointly, Mr. Clifford?
I think it's for the, unless there is a strong feeling otherwise, I think you should just vote on the recommendations as a whole, Chairman.
Recommendation as a whole. So are we all in favour of the recommendation as a whole to note this and send it out for public consultation? All those in favour to send it out for public consultation? Nobody wants to send it out to public consultation.
Sorry, Chairman. I thought we're just noting the report. It's not for us.
Chair, can you use the microphone, please?
Sorry. It says in the decision process, we are noting it, but in so doing, it then goes out to a 6-week consultation.
Yeah, but it's not our decision whether it goes to consultation.
No, it is not.
Yeah. I mean, you know,
yeah,
I think we're all happy to note it.
So are you all in favour to note the report? Hands up. All those in favour? Those against? Abstentions?
That's carried, Chairman.
Okay. That's carried. I think that is it tonight. Am I correct, Mr. Cliff?
You have a further item, Chairman, item 8.
Ah, sorry. Right. Indeed. Item tendering borders, garden community development plan document number 8. Yes? Right. Who am I? Shelley. Sorry, Shelley. Nearly made you an early night. It's all yours.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. This report is for members' information and provides an update on progress with the tendering Colchester Borders Garden Community Development Plan document, DPD. The last progress report was provided in August, and this report provides an update on work underway over the last month. A series of engagement workshops will be held in September and October. The first workshop for local plan committee members will be held tomorrow evening. The workshops will be run by the master planners, prior and partners, and officers will attend as observers. The workshops have been promoted widely, and local organisations representing seldom heard groups have been specifically approached. Workshops are also being held with statutory consultees. Some street interviews took place last week in local community settings. These used the engagement survey, and approximately 67 surveys were completed. The August update report provided members with a summary of the various tools available on the project's engagement website. Tools include Send a Pic, Pin Your Thoughts, Send us an e-postcard from the future. The engagement survey, give us your ideas. All these engagement tools will close on Friday, the 8th of October, to ensure sufficient time for officers and the master planners to review all comments received and incorporate comments, views and ideas into the draft DPD and master plan. The schools project competition, which asks children to animate, draw or create a 3D model of their ideal home, neighbourhood or a fun place to visit in the future, has now been extended from children in year 6 to all junior school age children, years 3 to 6. In August, officers met with the community liaison group to talk about what a DPD is and the purpose of the Regulation 18 Preferred Options consultation. A site walk for the community liaison group led by officers took place last Sunday. As members are aware, the Garden Community is one of the government's National Model Design Code programme pilots. The purpose of the National Model Design Code is to provide detailed guidance on the production of local design codes and guides. The Garden Community is testing the early phases, scoping, baseline, design vision and coding plan. At the end of this month, the councils will submit a report to government and take place in one-to-one sessions with architects and urban designers from the Office for Place. Officers have submitted a bid to government, putting the Garden Community forward to be part of the National Model Design Code Stage 2 pilot. If successful, we'd receive longer-term involvement and support from the Office for Place. The evidence base for the DPD continues to be developed. Since the August update, Place Services have been appointed to carry out a habitat regulations assessment and wintering bird survey for the DPD. And Quad have been appointed to carry out an economic and employment study. This will advise on how to maximise economic and employment generation opportunities in the Garden Community and analyse options for the location, format and potential users of the 25 hectares of employment land which will be provided in the Garden Community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shirley. I've got Councillor Barber.
Thank you very much. Tongue-tied there. Thank you very much for the report on this. I think it's really important that we're kept up to date, as we've asked for over the years, regularly on this matter, and it gratefully received. I mentioned this particular aspect of the plan in the spokes briefing, and I will state in the public area as well, in that I do think we need to invite the County Council to attend one of our local plan meetings to discuss the link road, officers to attend, for example, to answer questions, because I think a lot of the future of the Garden Community really does hinge on this quite big piece of infrastructure, as well as the RTS system. Obviously, I'm elected to the County Council, but here I think all members should have the opportunity to hear the information about the link road and the infrastructure that the county is pursuing. So I think it's only fair that we extend that invitation, because otherwise you're going to end up getting loads of questions that you won't necessarily know the answer to, because it's not within the Borough Council's remit. Nevertheless, it's absolutely vital to the work we're doing. We understand how that's progressing, and I think that's needed to be undertaken on the local plan committee, because otherwise all this input is really good, but if the link road and the rapid transit system fail, for want of a better word, aren't as envisaged, then a lot of the engagement and a lot of the planning we've been doing won't necessarily reflect the facts on the ground. So the engagement's really good, and I'm pleased to see it, but I also would quite like to extend that invitation if we get the opportunity to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Barber, what I will do is, I believe there are other invitations in the pipeline. We'll discuss it with the leader of the council to see whether we could have a separate one, or whether any others that might be in the pipeline are sufficient. And I'll come back to you on it. Councillor Julie Young.
Thanks very much, Chair. I agree with Councillor Barber. I think it would be really helpful for us to understand what the progress is regarding the link road. I think from our perspective, the Labour group's perspective, we've always had an infrastructure first approach in terms of development, and the link road is dependent on housing going forward, but we need to know where we are with the link road and what progress is being made. So that's one question. What I can't find in this report, Chair, is references to governance in terms of, the engagement, fully support what's been said about good engagement that's been going on, but there's nothing here about decisions about governance in terms of joint committees. So I don't know whether Shelley's able to answer that point. It was something I raised at the previous local plan meeting as well, because I think we need to establish how that's going to work in terms of decision making. Thank you, Chair.
Shelley, are you able to elaborate?
Yes, discussions on governance are taking place amongst the steering group and the members group, and no decision has been made yet.
Thank you for that. I have Councillor Fox, and then I have Councillor Andrea Luxembourg.
Thank you very much, Chair. One of the concerns that was raised at the last meeting when we received an update about the Garden Community Project was perhaps the slow pace that's taking place, and the leader of the council, Councillor Dundas, suggested that more meetings of the steering group would need to take place in order to drive forward activity. And I wondered if there are more meetings now timetabled in order to achieve that. Because, I think as Councillor Barber and Councillor Young, both raised two, considerable aspects of the project. And I think if they're going to be achieved, then I think we do really need to see some progress being made. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Luxembourg.
I don't know whether you wanted to take a break at 8, because I have 3 pages of questions, and that's before I go to 21 questions.
This is the last item, so I don't expect us to be going for very many more minutes.
Okay.
Sorry? Well, famous last words, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Good luck, because there's a lot of questions that I have. I'll start with, I appreciate the creative ways that officers are looking to engage, but I still feel like it's a tick box exercise. I think the schools project could work if you extended the age group up, but to take it down, there is a limit to how much you're going to achieve with that age group. But my particular problem is the master planning exercise that the parish council that I represent are very passionate, and they want to input in a constructive way to the plans. We've had the offer of 2 places taken up to 4 places, but I have 8 councillors that want to go. Now, there's no way to distinguish which ones are more worthy and which aren't. Equally, trying to plug the survey on Facebook, everybody thinks it's pointless. I mean, not everybody thinks it's pointless, but the overwhelming opinion is this is a waste of time, whereas actually you've got people that desperately want to come and get involved, and we're being restricted on that. So that's the first thing. Can we not extend that programme in order to facilitate that number of people that want to go? The other thing that is of concern, that there was a parish meeting set up for a couple of weeks ago, which was cancelled at very short notice with no explanation. I'd like to know why. Now that the link road has the planning applications been extended, are CBC prepared to make representations to say that it doesn't comply with ours or TDC's climate emergencies or ECC's climate action committee, whatever that report? It seems a bit wimpy as a thing. I don't even know what it is. But I think those representations, now they've been extended, should be made. There's still no name for the garden community, which is really frustrating. And there's still no confirmation of what the buffer zones are, which is really going to help with public engagement, because suddenly people can relax a bit, not fight one another amongst the communities, and believe that actually what they input will be recognised and respected. The rumours that I've heard about the Joint Planning Committee are that, you know, potentially it could be us and tendering, and to balance that all out, it could also be Essex County Council. I just think this is a recipe for disaster. I cannot see how a joint planning committee is going to work ever. You know, not only with our political splits, but also, you know, you're asking people that, you know, from Chelmsford, what they want to do in a site they've probably never been to. I mean, the beauty of our planning committee is, you know, we're all neighbours. We know the whole borough. We don't know it as well as our own wards. But the idea of somebody in Braintree making decisions about something at the end of my road, I find utterly offensive. I've got to be honest. It's just, you know, it's a pointless exercise as far as I'm concerned, because they don't care. And ECC have made that really clear with many decisions they've made over the years. I'd like to also invite, that's my questions for officers. Sorry guys, but the leader and the portfolio holder for the local plan are the ones that have been going to the steering group meetings. Also, a plan that was generated for a green cordon, an alternative to the link road, was sent to the leader of Colchester, as well as many people at Essex, I might add, which would have, you know, in theory, reduced congestion. It would have reduced massively the carbon emissions, and induced people to actually take up the RTS, and so therefore make our modal shift work. I know that there's been a dialogue amongst ourselves and the leader, but can he justify the decision by ECC that they're not even prepared to model that? And also, I have written as a parish councillor, but it's just as relevant in this role, to the chairman of the steering group, asking something like 21 questions about the link road. Clearly, something's gone horribly wrong. There are still no details on the RTS at all. Something's gone wrong with the link road. There's no explanation why the planning application was delayed. The changes are minor, so why go through all that work? But I think there are bigger concerns. I have bigger concerns, and I can speculate as to what they are. Like, have we bought all the land? And if we haven't, how long will it take to get through CPOs? And if we use CPOs, are we going to lose the funding because we were tied into some unbearably constrictive set of conditions of that HIF funding, which we were never given any access to? It was signed off by the leader of the council without, I think, even going to his cabinet, which is a concern for me. I'm just, you know, having lived and breathed this for many, many years, a lot of the things that were predicted at hearing, I think, are coming home to roost. It was 10 million over budget a year ago. When was the hearing? I can't even remember. It was 10 million over budget then. You know, we've had a pandemic and cost of raw materials has rocketed. So clearly it's going to be even more over budget. And there just isn't a track record for, you know, the contractor that's sort of miraculously got appointed without any tender process. I don't understand why that's you know, okay. I don't understand how, given that they were producing evidence on traffic modelling, which is clearly not going to be independent, and then the contractors. I mean, that's just, how did that happen? That's a conflict of interest that is so blatantly obvious, a child could see it. Like I said, I've got lots and lots of questions. Perhaps our officers aren't able to answer those questions tonight because, you know, the powers that be are holding that information. But I just think it's critically important that we start being honest, because if there is a problem with the RTS, if there is a problem with the link road, it affects our housing numbers.
Sorry for interrupting, but the portfolio holder's just indicated he'd like to come forward, so he might be able to add something.
Okay,
I saw his hand up, so I'm assuming.
Okay, I just summarise, because the relevance to this meeting is if there is, our policy was always, and that's everybody signed up to this, is infrastructure first. If we have to start delivering houses without a dual carriageway, which we don't need, by the way, but a dual carriageway to access that site, how on earth is that going to affect housing numbers going forwards? And what is the correct term? It's how many houses you put out a year, and there's a proper grown-up way of saying it.
Leader of the council is coming forward.
Housing delivery, yeah. I mean, how are we going to do that?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to jump in. I probably can't. I was trying to jot down all the questions. Apologies if I've missed one or two, but I'll just try and cover off briefly a few things. Firstly, regarding the meetings, hopefully we are upping them to once a month. We've had the September meeting, and there should be another one in October. Hopefully, the reason given to us for the cancellation of the last engagement event was officer availability. That's what we were told. At the last meeting, I know Councillor Corey has been attending, and Councillor King attended. We did do the master planning engagement exercise, which I believe is going to go out to various others, including parish councils, I think on September the 22nd. I take the point actually about the number of attendees to parish council. I think that's a fair, from the parish council, I think that's a fair question, and I'm happy to ask it of the group as to why 2 doesn't seem very reasonable from Women Hotel Council. On the governance arrangement, I don't know if group leaders have received it yet, but I have asked the Cabinet PA to set up a group leaders meeting, which will have the possibility of a joint planning committee to be discussed on that. I think it is something which ideally we want agreement and support from all groups on if we choose to go forward with it, because realistically, this is probably a 20 to 30 year project. So I think we all need to try and be on the same page if we possibly can. In terms of Essex County Council's involvement, I think probably as it's likely to be proposed, TDC and CBC are always likely to have the majority. And my view is, we talked about, I'm not going to answer for ECC on the road, but obviously that they do have planning considerations on aspects of this. And if we don't have them in as part of it and them ceding some powers to that planning committee on which CBC and TDC have a majority, they will just be able to go ahead and make decisions which we won't have any say over at all. So actually, we could take it with the view that actually it gives us more input and more control over it. Obviously, that perhaps depends on the details, which is perhaps discussion for another day. But it swings and roundabouts. On the letter, I have received a copy of that from Wivenhoe Town Council. It asked some good questions. At the last steering group, I did emphasise the need for a prompt and detailed reply. I trust that that will be forthcoming. And if it isn't, then obviously I am prepared to bring that up with the steering group straight away. And apologies if I missed any points I might have done. I did my best.
If you've said you've got a very long list of questions, I'm wondering whether it might be advisable to put them in writing to Shelley so you can get a detailed answer, and then at the next meeting you'll be able to quiz her on it if so be, if you wanted to.
The trouble is some of these questions need answering tonight, Chair.
Okay.
Just to correct you on the places, we have had that extended from 2 to 4, but my problem is I've got 8 councillors that want to go. We are a significantly large parish, and yet I'm told that all parishes are being offered 4 places now. It's proportionate to the amount of impact it has on on the settlement. I don't know what size Ardley is, but I can't imagine they've got 13 councillors. So, I mean, that's one particular thing that we can't delay because that is next week.
Can I just ask, if you've got a lot more questions, shall we take a 10-minute break?
Yeah.
Okay. In that case, we'll take a 10-minute break and then come back and resume. Is that okay, Richard? Yeah. Yeah.
That's for you, Chairman.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I just had a chat in the intervening period. A lot of the questions that Andrea has don't fall within the remit of Shelley. So I've asked her to ask the questions that are appertaining to the report tonight and to submit all the other ones in writing so they can go to the relevant officer to get written replies that will then be submitted to all the panel, and they can then be added to the minutes of for the next meeting. Is that acceptable? Okay. Andrea, over to you.
Okay, on the basis that there are more councillors from Wivenhoe than places allocated, is it possible to extend the master planning programme to incorporate them? Does CBC plan to submit to the ECC planning application for the link road to mention anything about climate emergency declarations and its compliance with them? Will we ever have a name for this thing, even a working name? Do you know when the confirmation of the buffer zones will be revealed to the public? And do you know when the details of the RTS will come through to anybody?
Shelley, that's you.
Okay, I was scribbling those down, so I hope I've got them all. So the first question about the parish council workshop, I can't answer that tonight, but it's something I can go back and talk to colleagues with tomorrow. But just to say, with the workshops, I think I'm not sure what the maximum number of attendees are for each of the workshops, but I know consideration was given to giving enough people the chance to attend, but making sure there weren't too many people, you know, so the workshop couldn't become productive. And also fairness as well, giving every parish council the same opportunity to send councillors. So I'll take that back and discuss with colleagues tomorrow. And the council submitted a representation to the planning application for the link road earlier this year. A name for the garden community. I know that is something that's recently been discussed as to how, you know, how to go about coming up with a name. Buffer zones, the section 1 adopted local plan does refer to landscape buffers. I appreciate there's no map defining those, but it does refer to landscape buffers. And route for the RTS. I'm not sure on the timing for that. It may be that detail will be included when the draft DPD and draft master plan is published for consultation early next year.
Okay. During the interval as well, several members during the previous items mentioned the fact that we should have ECC here to discuss issues around the link road and also the rapid transit. I'm proposing that we set up a separate meeting, inviting them here to do just that. Is everybody agree with that item? Yes? Karen, was there something else you wanted me to add to that list of ECC to?
I just wondered whether it was worth inviting others so that some of Andrea's comments or questions, which aren't sort of planning related, can be addressed.
Who did you have in mind, just so that Richard knows when we do the invite?
I guess from Colchester it would be Lindsay Barker, and maybe Steve Everson might be coming from the County Council as the lead officer on the steering group, so he might be the right person covering the RTS and Link Road anyway. I don't know if Paul's got any other thoughts about who might be suitable to attend.
I would think it's probably going to be people who attend the steering group would be my answer to that. Just on the issue over Wivenhoe Town Council, you probably saw me typing furiously there. I have asked a question regarding whether more people could attend to the steering group. It's not my decision, and we'll see what the answer is.
So we will invite ECC and Lindsay Barker and also the head of the steering group to come to a separate meeting, date obviously to be confirmed. Yes? Okay. Are there any other speakers on this? Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the questions that were going to be answered but weren't, can we attach the responses to the minutes of this meeting as well as including them in the agenda for the upcoming meeting in the future as well, just to make sure that they're in the public domain and everyone sees a response rather than just councillors, because sometimes we get the information internally when it was asked in a public forum, and I just want to make sure they're able to be referenced by any member of the public too. And I warmly welcome the comments of having an additional meeting with Essex County Council. I just want to add the point that I do think that it's worthwhile in future considering more meetings if there's ever for the local plan committee as the reports and this project in theory progresses. I do think there will be items we need to discuss as a local plan committee.
I'm sure there will be, and obviously when we do, we will have them. Karen?
Yeah, that's fine. We'll always bear that in mind, Lewis, but just for a point of clarity, sometimes it might make more sense to have briefings. And, you know, I think that's what we're talking about in terms of the garden community, but correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it needs to be a formal committee meeting. In fact, a briefing might enable more people to attend because they could attend virtually. We could have a session here so that people that wanted to could attend, but then others could also join in. Yeah.
So what does the committee think? Do you want ECC, etc. here, or are you content for it to be a Zoom meeting? Lewis?
I think that ECC should be given the offer to attend remotely anyway, because they're obviously not in a voting capacity. I think the key for me is that it should be in the public arena. I think the public should have the opportunity to hear what's being discussed behind closed doors to the extent that at the moment that's possible. I don't feel we should be hiding anything. And I do think even if it's just in a briefing format, that should be made available in the public arena. If there's a necessity for a confidential section for whatever reason, I think that should be considered at the time. But principally, I don't see why it should. I'm happy to do it remotely instantly, completely. But I just think as long as it's in the public domain, for me, that's quite important as a principle on the matter.
What do others think?
Thanks.
I just want answers. I like that. I just want answers. So, are you content then for it to be a Zoom meeting, providing that everybody gets to see it? How do you propose we do that?
Well, we did it during the pandemic for well over a year, so I would have thought it's possible.
Yeah, of course we did. Okay, so if there are no other speakers on item 2, Andrea will submit her list of questions so they can get to the appropriate answer officers, and we'll get the answers circulated to us as well. They'll be attached then to the minutes as and when they come out. So we don't have a decision to make on this one, do we, Richard? Is it just to note?
It's just a note, Chairman. There's
Just
no
to
action
note, do we
required.
formally note the report? Note, yes? Okay, thank you very much. That completes the night. Thank you very much. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Olida. And thank you, everybody. Richard especially. And we mustn't forget the sound engineers.